Hello, everyone, and welcome to Conversations with I Follow the Leader, episode 25 Pipelines, Pathways, and Promotion with Dr. Ceceilia Parnther. I am so excited. If you have been a long-time watcher or listener of Conversations with I Follow the Leader, you know that Cecilia was on last year for one of the first episodes, and so go back and listen if you have not seen that. You are really in for a treat today. I am going to bring on Dr. Parnther and give her introduction. Hello.
Hello. It's such a pleasure to join you this morning. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thank you for coming back. I'm excited. If people come back, I feel like that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So I'm so excited because you will see Pipelines, Pathways, and Promotion is the subtitle of a book that Cecilia is a co-editor for Voices from Women Leaders on Success in Higher Education. If you have not had the chance to purchase this, we will put the links in after. And so that will be the focus of our conversation today. This is really appropriate. Yesterday was International Women's Day. This month, of course, is Women's History Month. And so at I Follow the Leader, we talk about these subjects all year because we believe that is truly pivotal. But this is a really great month to discuss this topic. Dr. Parnther, and I call her Cecilia. You'll see that a lot throughout this session. If you meet her, please call her Doctor. I have known Cecilia a long time, so I dropped some of those informalities, but so important, especially for Black women, that we're really addressing them as doctors. So, Dr. Parnther, again, co-editor of Voices from Women Leaders on Success in Higher Education, just published February 2022. Drawn from research and the lived experiences of women and non binary people in higher education leadership, the book serves as a guide in understanding the gender disparity in higher ed and how women leaders can forge pathways to promotion and success through those systemic barriers, obstacles, and a lack of representation. So excited. Tell us a little more just about the book.
Absolutely. So this is, I am representing a group of phenomenal women who come from various disciplines, deans, directors, provosts, presidents, um, coordinators, researchers who are all just very passionate about our pathways to leadership. And so Dr. Koza and I started having conversations about what this looks like as I'm a faculty member in an educational leadership department, right? And so
Yes.
one of the issues that comes up is, what does it mean to show up as a woman leader in all of your authenticity? I have been so privileged to learn best practices, learn lessons, learn what not to do, and be mentored and sponsored by amazing women. And so I wanted to continue to incorporate that into my research and what that means for equity. And what I found from our individual contributors is I've just learned so much about the importance of us bringing our authentic selves and unapologetically standing in it and allowing that to be the thing that helps to role model leadership for others, that helps us to forge pathways and actually helps us to turn some of the status quo on its head. And so the book delves into various issues of identity, what it means to show up as a leader in all of our various identities, in all of our various roles, and what it means to challenge these norms and expectations of those who seek to place us in boxes. And so I just have so much appreciation for the contributors to the text who really just, they leaned into not only their identities, but the identities of those that they support and study, to be able to offer us different ways of thinking about what these pathways to success are.
Thank you. And I love just the vulnerability and the ability of those who contributed for being willing to talk about this. Obviously, we say that these are courageous conversations in quotes because our hope is, right, that books like yours, this won't be a courageous conversation, that people will have these conversations more. But if we're honest, right now, this book is unique to see stories of women and talking about pathways. This is really unique, and so I just really applaud you and your co-editor for being willing to listen and help tell the stories of those that are embedded throughout the book.
Thank you so much. I think if I can add that it was happening during a pandemic, and so many of our authors were also leading during a pandemic, leading at kind of the fever pitch of expressions of social unrest due to racial injustice in the country, and being those representatives on their respective campuses in their respective leadership positions. So to be able to have that courage, talking about our problems, talking about pathways forward, and also calling ourselves in to challenge the ways that we kind of embody these traditional expectations and sometimes gatekeep, and not, we don't allow others to flourish in their leadership capabilities. So, it was really, really inspiring to see folks who were able to do that in spite of so much that's going on. And there were those who could not continue because of their dedication to their responsibilities. And I want to honor that as well, because it's a very difficult thing to have to put on paper these experiences as we continue to live them. But it's so important that they did.
Yes, and you talk about the lived experience, right? You all don't shy away from talking about things such as bullying, right? Bullying, informal mentorship, things that are happening often unsaid or unspoken in the workplace, but that people are having to navigate every day. Can you just tell us a little more, for those who have not read the book yet? Why is this so important, and why did you all go that deep?
Absolutely. When we talk about identity, sometimes the safe way to do that is to, give a brief description of cultural backgrounds, um, and let that be this guiding inspirational story. But the reality is there are a lot of mental models out there that really force women into these boxes, like the choice to have children or not have children, the choice to be in a partnership or not be in a partnership, thinking about things such as your how you are physically represented in an environment that really seems to value the gender binary and all of these different attributions. And so what we did was we wanted to look at that theoretically. So what does this look like from an organizational leadership perspective? What does this look like from a place of care and concern and belongingness? And then who's left out of these conversations? And how do we challenge and bridge that gap? Because the reality is, women continue to be overrepresented in higher education, except in these areas of leadership. And so, why is it that we've been so committed to maintaining mental models that do not provide pathways for women to flourish when we know that there are plenty of women who are standing in line ready for those opportunities? There are also elements of identity in there that the book describes, and we have to deal with our own socialization. And so, to the point on our chapter that addresses bullying, these are things that happen when we have scarcity mindsets, when we have been gatekept for so long that there's a feeling that we all cannot sit at the table. So we create these pathways that have additional barriers, such as an exorbitant cost, that focus on the type of institution that you've gone to. And we find ourselves, unfortunately, comfortable with being the only person in this area or the only representative, because somehow that suggests that we've transcended. But really, I think what so many of our authors get at is that that work is not done, and that the designation of one person in leadership is not indicative of us having forged a pathway. There's still so much work to do. For so many of our authors, that work comes in the form of advocacy. So we have a lot of folks who, when you're talking about family, work-life balance, how do we want this for ourselves, but how do we role model what that looks like for future leaders? How do we advocate and demand that it is normal that we have conversations about expanding policies and supports for individuals who choose to be working parents? That doesn't just impact a subset of us. It impacts what it means to care for one's family, however that family is defined. But if we're not willing to have the conversations because we're so committed to many of the barriers that are discussed in the book, we make no space for opportunities. And so what I think that readers will find is a balance of theory that kind of guides how we frame the text, but then an acknowledgement of the barriers and a focus on opportunities.
Okay, that was way too powerful. I have too many notes from that section. Just really, really powerful, and can't wait to personally listen to that back. Something that I made a note of, right, is not thinking that you have transcended if you are the one and only, that you still should feel responsible for the pathway of others. And I think that is so important. We're talking about this month, just right, breaking through the glass ceiling, right? What does that really mean? And have you really broken through if others can't get through the same pathway as you? And so I think that is just so powerful. Other things I want to highlight are, right, this is systemic that you said. And how can we stop being committed to barriers? That is just so powerful, because so many of us, even unknowingly, are committed to systemic barriers in place. And of course, it's mostly hurting those who are underrepresented. And so you are someone, right, who is very successful in your field. For those who don't know Dr. Parnther, I'm going to look to make sure I get her title right. She's the Assistant Professor of Higher Education in the Department of Administrative and Structural Leadership and the School of Education at St. John's University. And you're also a program coordinator and a faculty in residence. So, right, you are in leadership. Can you tell us a little more about, right, have you made it? What does that mean? Obviously, we know from your book you're focusing on pathways, but what did it take for you as a leader to get where you are? And yeah, I would love to know a little more about that.
What does it mean to make it, right? Because I certainly, I feel like I have been honestly very, very fortunate, fortunate to even be able to have this conversation. And so I think any of the successes that I own are really in part uh, due to family, a sisterhood, these wonderful mentors that have challenged my own models of myself and kind of forced me to want more, but also to have this desire to do what I can to make sure that anybody who comes in these spaces after me has the information that they need, has the capital. One of the things that I appreciate most, and this is a through line for all of the authors of our book, is this commitment to leaving spaces, better than we found them. And I don't mean that by saying, oh, I've had this program that has my name on it and I have this mark, right? How did you make it so the next person who comes in feels more comfortable? How did you make it so that if I'm not in the room and something applies to me, that you've mentioned me, that, there are folks who talk about mentorship in the book, but really delve into what that looks like in all of its complexity. how we cannot, again, rely on some of these systemic expectations of what a mentor mentee looks like. And if it looks different, to kind of dismiss that relationship. We also talk a bit about the difference between mentoring and sponsorship. And I think this really gets at what you're describing here is what is our obligation in terms of my own personal successes. If there were not people who were willing to sponsor me, I could be dismissed because of how I present, how I look, age, size, anything, race, assumptions that are made about me and my work without even allowing me the chance to speak. And I've been so grateful to be able to engage in conversation and to really have women who have poured into me and believed in me even when I didn't necessarily have the capacity to believe in myself in that way. And ultimately, that's what guides my work around equity in education in general, which is who isn't at the table? How will these things impact the folks who don't have a chance to speak? And am I even the best person to be speaking about this? And if I'm not, how am I connecting you to folks who are in the best position to speak? We make very clear there are so many other perspectives that we want and we value, and we need to have this conversation. This is a small beginning, a meaningful beginning to a conversation that needs to continue in so many nuanced ways. But we really need to name those folks who are doing the work, because they might not feel like they can be in certain spaces. They may have so much on their shoulders because they're doing this additional labor being the representative. And so honestly, all of my successes personally, I think, are built on the shoulders of just some amazing folks who were willing to believe, give me that chance, not act surprised that I show up in spaces, because we get so much of that. And then also just having that core group of folks who are just willing to cheer for you, because we're out here doing the best that we can, and it's a very difficult time, especially right now. And so knowing that you have folks in your corner who aren't coming from a place of competition, but coming from a place of valuing the work for the work. If we want to be leaders, what are we leading? And is it leading for ego, or is it leading because we think that we have something to bring to the table? And if we're doing the best we can and you are that leader, I want to cheer for you, because I know that leadership takes us pouring everything we have into the work in some ways. And I want to see how I can best support you. I want to learn from you. I want to be inspired by you. And that's just something that I'm passionate about. I really am fortunate to be able to research things that I love, and to continue to learn from these contributors, other folks that we continue to speak with. Shout out to my amazing cohorts and then students at Dale, at St. John's, who just continue to role model what it means to lead, especially in difficult times. Those are all significant contributing factors.
That's so powerful, and I love that you acknowledge. Obviously, we are living in such difficult times. For those who are in the United States, and obviously globally right now, the last few years, right, the last few days have been extremely challenging, and so this is when you really see the difference between managers and those who are actually leaders, and like you said, are taking the time to cheerlead others, to make sure people have a seat at the table. I just think it's so important. And something you said earlier, right, is getting out of those boxes we're used to. And that's really going to take some learning, some education, right? We don't just change by osmosis, it is going to take learning. And so I love you've mentioned this before, but your book starts out with the theory and practice and then delves deeper. And so I love measurement, I love research. And so for those who haven't seen the book yet, I love it because part one is research and theory, right? And then you go into perspectives from women in leadership positions, identity in women's leadership, effective practices considering the advancement of women in higher education, and finish with resources. And so you've talked about a lot of those different elements throughout this conversation. And so would love to know what can someone do if someone's listening or watching right now. How can they be a positive contributor to helping women advance?
I think at every level, what I've learned from this research is that at every level, it's important for us to not count ourselves out of the game. To defining leadership for yourself with whatever boundaries you need it to have. Um, to be committed to being courageous and showing up as yourself. We all know the, coded language. We've had conversations about what it means to show up in spaces, and have to deal with stereotypes and things like that. But here's the thing. If we aren't willing to show up as ourselves, then the folks who are looking to us will not be willing to show up. And so setting those goals, what little things can I do to bring my authentic self, to role model these behaviors that allow me to be true to me? And we see that in the book when women are sharing their stories about how they have managed things, when they have coordinated programs to help folks think together in new ways. But then also, it's about what value we're bringing. So when we look at identity and women's leadership, how are we valuing the different identities that are coming to the table? And what does that mean for everyone? Not what does that mean to make a person or a specific group more comfortable? We're not looking for comfort. We're looking for equality. We're looking for opportunity. We're looking for honesty. And so what can we do? How does that show up in our mentorship? How does that show up in our sponsorship? And then finally, how do we challenge these models that have excluded different populations? I'm sorry, you got some New York City motorcycle action going on outside of my window. But what are these practices that we've come to know? Everyone, whether you're in higher education or industry or any other sector, we all know there are certain conferences, there are certain prestigious awards that we assign value to, and those things are very valuable. I'm not suggesting that they aren't. We should, where we can, we should navigate those pathways, but we should also look around and we should ask ourselves, who is not in this space and why are they not in this space? Because we know that leadership and the propensity for leadership is not limited to those who can afford thousands of dollars of mentorship and sponsorship at an institution or company that is financially viable enough to provide that opportunity. And what we see, especially for women of minoritized identities, is that they've spent a lifetime creating these pockets of space for safety because for so many decades, centuries, they've been excluded from full participation in these activities. And so how are they creating spaces for themselves, uplifting themselves, mentoring themselves? And how do we bring that to the forefront? It's delicate, right? So how do you bring it to the forefront, protecting the sanctity of the space, but also how do we value that? Because that is labor. Women are putting in the work to pour into each other because they aren't getting it from society. They are demonstrating these leadership characteristics. They're learning from each other. What does that look like in conversation about leadership experience? And how does it then translate to the social capital that we need to kind of fortify these pathways to promotion?
That's just so great and so important, right? How can we band together but also make it wider, right? So other people understand that women, right, are leaders too. Women need the support too, and like you said, social capital. And I know something we talked about when we were just having this conversation with ourselves was a lot of people aren't used to being invited to the table. And so, if you're now getting invited to the table, that can bring forth a lot more complexities. And I love something you said is that we have reached a critical mass, right? And so, really believing that these tides can shift, we can make a change. Just really think that's important. And for those who are listening, I'm just putting up some things. We have a thank you for this wonderful opportunity to learn about Dr. Parnther's work. Yes, she is amazing, amazing. We will link to her on LinkedIn, so please follow her and the amazing work she's doing. She is definitely a thought leader and just someone I personally admire. So, I know we are coming up on time, but would love for you to share with us just any final thoughts about the book, about what we can do moving forward, and how can we support you in your work.
Absolutely. I would just thank you for engaging in this conversation. I think one of the biggest takeaways that we haven't discussed is also just being really centered in what we value. When we are centered in what we value and we're working in our honesty and truth, I think that there are so many things that shine through, and it's a learning opportunity for others. It helps us to keep satisfaction. You know, we are not designed to always fight. So how can we do things in service to being our best selves and to our values? All of the women who are contributors to this book and so many others, what they do is they exemplify that, and they do that through their service and their research. I hope that you will pick up a copy and be as inspired by them as Dr. Koza and I certainly have been. Find value in these resources and challenge yourself and your communities to just think about the ways that we uplift each other and think about the opportunities that we can to bring other folks to the table, because there are so many different perspectives that we are better for having, but we have to hear them and we have to include them in our everyday conversation. So I hope that this is the start of a, and there have been books on leadership, absolutely, but I hope that as we come through this next stage in what higher education looks like, in particular, but leadership throughout, that we are just able to continue this conversation, continuing it through celebration and challenge and focusing on a commitment to our values.
Thank you. And I just thank you for being here. Thank you for the comments. I agree. I love that. Katie, thank you for being here. She said, thank you. So many truths ordering her copy today. We're just getting a lot of thank yous in the comments. And I love this because the great thing is technology sometimes can be amazing. Many of you will be watching this later. So please still feel free to comment. We have hundreds of people who come and watch back, who listen to the podcast, which is really exciting. So please, please, please pick up your copy of this book. We can always continue learning. And the more books we have like this on our bookshelf, right, this changes things. Ceceilia talked about celebrating women. And I try to show people there's really tangible, easy ways that you can celebrate and support women. One of the ways I do that, right, is by purchasing content by women. I think it's just so important that we do more of that and really support women directly. There's little jokes that, for small businesses and for women, and like you said, those in minoritized groups, like when you buy one book, this really matters. And
Absolutely.
so just thank you for being here. I know this won't be our last conversation because you're just so amazing. So
You
thank
can't
you,
get away.
thank you.
You'll never get away from me.
No,
I
no,
love this
no.
opportunity.
All right, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone watching. Really appreciate you.
Awesome. Well, that was amazing. Episode 25 of Conversations Where I Follow the Leader, Pipelines, Pathways, and Promotion. I just want to highlight some of those last tidbits that Dr. Parnther shared about how we can help, how we can move forward, because I think that action is so important. Education, and then let's move. Let's do something today. So she said, be authentic, center yourself in your values, continue to serve. If you're not serving, start serving. Continue to uplift. If you're not currently uplifting others, start doing that. I promise it will help you too. And then be willing to hear and include different perspectives. So, those were just some of her final thoughts. Thank you, everyone, for coming, for engaging. Again, commenting, right? That's something that helps women. Showing women affirmation, cheerleading them, agree that Dr. Parnther is brilliant. So thank you for this comment, and thank you for being here, Shayna, and everyone else who is watching or listening. Really appreciate your support, and we will see you again soon for episode 26 of Conversations with I Follow the Leader. That will be on March 23rd with one of our leaders at I Follow the Leader. And so excited to have Anise on, and we will talk about why acknowledgement is not enough. So, what does it look like to intentionally facilitate and invest in equitable and inclusive environments beyond diversity? And so, we will continue the conversation. Thank you all for being here today. Love seeing people ordering the book. This makes me happy, right? This brings me joy. And so thank you everyone who is going to order the book and support Dr. Parnther and her co-editor. We will see you all soon.